And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 64th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 386th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, February 15th, 2018. I'm your host, Jared Morris, and let's begin this week how we begin every episode of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for the banner moment, I want to take you back to the first half of the Illinois game from Wednesday evening and to the 7-0 run that was sparked by Al Durham and Justin Smith early in the first half. It took IU from being down 14-12 after a sluggish early start to being up 19-14, sparked an overall 14-0 run. And the Hoosiers never really looked back from that moment on, save for kind of that one little lull in the second half when Illinois got it down to 2 and Juwan Morgan made that huge block on LeBron Black, which happened to be last night's banner moment. But I want to spend some time on the freshmen, and we're going to talk about them a little bit later in the show as well, because Al and Justin, who have obviously been very up and down in Big Ten play, as you would expect from freshmen, scored 13 of Indiana's first 19 points. And they were important points for a team that was, kind of struggling out of the gate, some upperclassmen, a little bit sluggish, as I mentioned. For those guys to come out and really provide that spark off the bench was huge. And more so than just coming in and scoring, it was the way that they showed enhancements to their offensive arsenal. They showed kind of new tricks in their bag. We saw Justin Smith, going off the dribble from outside the three-point line and finishing through contact a couple of times. We saw Al Durham knock down a couple more three-pointers and have that nice backdoor cut at the end of the game, showing really nice recognition and a nice ability to finish. And as we go through the end of this season, obviously, we all hold out the slimmest of hopes that Indiana can somehow find their way into the NCAA tournament, although, fighting for an NIT berth seems much more likely right now. But whether Indiana makes any type of tournament or not, or, finishes the season on a nice win streak or some kind of flourish, what's really important in these games down the stretch is that young guys take the next steps to becoming even more consistent contributors next year. And while Devontae Green struggled in the Illinois game, we've certainly seen him take some positive steps over the 5 or 6 games previous to that. And hopefully what we saw from Al and Justin on Wednesday night was a sign that they're ready to finish the season strong and end their freshman season building some momentum heading into what should be hopefully successful sophomore campaigns for both of them. All right, let me now introduce my esteemed co-hosts for this week's show. To my left, we once again do not have Andy Bottoms yet, one of the world's most respected bracketologists and the longtime president of the Robert Johnson fan club. He has his daughter's basketball practice, but he has pledged to join us after the first segment, so we look forward to welcoming Andy in then. And to my right, we have a man who has quickly become the president of the impromptu Freddie McSwain fan club that has popped up and become heavily populated over the past few weeks. He's a columnist for the Big Lead, and he is the person who I hold personally responsible for the sluggish attendance at Indiana's non-marquee home games this year due to his unyielding, incessant, and disrespectful negative commentary about the holy, pristine cathedral of basketball that is Simon Scott Assembly Hall. I hope you're proud of yourself, you jackwagon. He is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, what is your rant from the past week in Indiana basketball?
I mean, just because I don't like it doesn't mean you shouldn't go to the games. I never said that. I never advocated that. I think that what has become really apparent with Indiana over the last few weeks is that this defense is for real. And we've talked about it on post-game shows. We've talked about it on the radio show as well. But look, they can really get it done on the defensive end. And this is going to be the linchpin of the Archie Miller era. And it's pretty amazing considering where they were last year to be able to turn this around and be such a good defensive team this year. It took a while to happen. There were certainly some stumbles along the way, but for the most part, over the last, 10, 12 games, they've become one of the best defensive teams in the nation. You look at it, and I know we've talked about this before, but you look at it, you add some offensive talent, add some shooters, and this looks like a team that could really contend in the Big Ten next year if they continue to build on what they've established this year. They've won 3 straight games they had to win. These haven't been world-beating teams, but even when they haven't had their best offense, they've still brought that defensive intensity, and been able to shut opponents down and win fairly comfortably. I think the Illinois game, there was a little back and forth there. There were a lot of free throws, so that kind of jacked the score up a little bit. But at the same time, they were able to get stops when they needed to. They were able to rebound the basketball, and they were able to, shut Illinois down when they needed to win that game. And if they can do that and continue to do that, and you saw them do it against Michigan State at home, you saw them do it against Purdue at home, and you saw them do it against Illinois on the road for a long stretch before they kind of blew that game. If they can do that game in, game out, they're gonna be in every single game, and they're gonna be, and that's moving forward too, not just this year. If you can play that kind of defense, you're gonna be in every single game. And so I think that people, regardless of where the season ends up, regardless of what the record ends up being, where they finish, what postseason tournament they go to or don't go to, I think it's worth noting how far this team has come and what the coaching staff has done, and giving them the credit for how much this team has grown.
All right, here's what we are going to discuss this week. We will comment briefly on the explosive report that came out just late Thursday night, right before we went on the air, from Pete Thamel about what is going on with the FBI probe into college basketball. And then we're going to take a more in-depth examination of the potential of Justin Smith and Al Durham. We talked about them a lot on the post-game show after the Illinois game, but I want to dig into those guys a little bit more. And then we'll get into some Big Ten tournament talk, because a lot of people are starting to get optimistic about the Hoosiers' chances to make a run in New York. And so let's indulge that while we can. And then we will end, as we usually do, with a smattering of additional questions, including one about how Indiana's on-court growth this season may impact Romeo Langford's upcoming decision. All of that coming here on Assembly Call Radio. But first, this quick reminder: the next time that you are looking for tickets to a sporting event or concert, remember our friends at SeatGeek. You can download their app, which is incredibly convenient and easy to use, so we certainly recommend that. Or if you just want an easy-to-remember URL that will take you directly to the IU basketball ticket listings on SeatGeek's website, use the URL iutickets.shop. So, for example, say that you want to go to senior night, the IU Ohio State game on February 23rd, both to see Indiana get a chance for a big victory, to see the senior speeches, and maybe to meet us, because we will be there and we'd love to meet you all. So if you do go to that game, let us know. But if you want to go to that game, SeatGeek has you covered. You go to iutickets.shop and you can find the best prices available. So do that, whether you're using the app, whether you're using that URL, iutickets.shop, you can find the best prices there. And if it's your first time using SeatGeek, don't forget the promo code ASSEMBLY, ASSEMBLY. Use it when you make your first purchase, and you will get $20 back after that purchase. Again, the promo code is ASSEMBLY. All right, you are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips as we anxiously await Andy Bottom's arrival for this episode. Ryan, real quick, I hadn't planned on talking about this, but obviously the news broke right before we went live, so we should at least address it. If you haven't seen the report by Pete Thamel for Yahoo Sports, it kind of updates and brings everybody up to speed on what's going on with the FBI probe into college basketball. And it's quite explosive without being very specific. And so if you read it, I think you'll see why there's not a lot for us to go on in terms of specifics and having a real in-depth conversation here. But certainly it's an ominous article. And it doesn't really give any timetable for when specifics may leak out about what teams and this, that, or the other. But the article suggests that we're talking, every conference, 40, 50 teams, Hall of Fame coaches, and that if any of this stuff does leak, before, the tournament, that could be impacted. I think one of the lines in there was that, half of the teams that were revealed in the Sweet 16 revealed would have any tournament wins vacated anyway. So that gives you, I guess, kind of an overview understanding for just how deep this thing might be. So again, there's not a lot to go on. Don't want to talk about it for real long, but I want to at least bring it up and address it and get your thoughts on it, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, pretty shocking report that came out by Pete Thamel. But I think that when you've talked to people in this business who have dug into this at all, I mean, some people just, that look, they know people who know people, and everybody, and these are people who are not prone to hyperbole that I've talked to, at least, are saying, yeah, this is going to change college basketball forever. Like, I mean, that's the kind of and I'm sorry, but that's pretty big. No matter how you slice it, that's enormous. And so, I don't know what's going to come out. I don't have any insight into that. But at the same time, these people who I trust are saying things that paint this as the biggest scandal that will ever hit college athletics, and that everybody's involved, and that the comparison that keeps coming up is the steroid scandal in baseball, and we all know how enormous that was and how that changed the game. At least we hope it did. We don't know if the users are just better than the testers, but it certainly led to some really hefty consequences for the people who were caught. And this is getting discussed in the same kind of terms as that, which means that it probably, they're right, that it would be the biggest scandal in college sports history. So we'll see. I'm sure we will discuss this maybe in an off-season show unless something breaks big time. But
hopefully in a very Schadenfreude way, and not not discussing any specifics about our team.
Not involving teams that we enjoy discussing. Yeah. But no, I think that it's certainly going to be pretty impactful and enormous when all the information is finally out there. Certainly. I mean, nobody I've talked to about this thinks it's, just people blowing wind. Like they really think there's something real here.
And by the way, when you talk about changing the game, it could change the game for the better in the long run.
Of course,
to get this all out in the open and maybe put some stuff over the table that's been under the table for a long time, which is what's created this mess.
I think partially what you have to look at is it's going to be impactful no matter what happens, and it's going to create a shakeup, and it might be uneasy and pretty bad for a while. But I think the long-term effect will end up being positive. So, we'll see. I mean, we don't know. I mean, we're flying blind here as far as this goes, but just from the people I've talked to, it sounds like, a reckoning is coming.
Yep. All righty. Coming up on the Assembly Call, we discuss the long-term potential of Indiana's two freshmen who stepped up big Wednesday night, Justin Smith and Al Durham, and hopefully Andy Bottoms will be here too. Stick with us on the Assembly Call. All right, 12:23 to start. Hello to everybody watching live on YouTube. Great to see you all here, as always. I love how active the chats are, like on a consistent basis. It's awesome.
Almost,
especially for post-game shows, but even for the Thursday night shows, it's awesome seeing that.
What was I going to say? Yeah, at some point we should plug the meetup.
Hey, Andy's here.
Hey.
All right.
Go back out. Come back in.
Dang it.
Crap. Yeah, this happens almost every time.
Every time. Yeah,
for some reason, Andy comes in, his audio's bad, and then he pops out, comes back in, and it's good again. Yeah, meetup. So
plug it for the radio show because we haven't plugged it on the radio show yet.
Yeah, we need to get the final details. So we're gonna do Knicks during the day, right? We'll hang out there and just whoever wants to come hang, and then we'll go to the game. I want to try and get to the arena. I mean, pretty early.
Yeah, I can.
You're gonna have to show me how the media stuff works.
Don't talk.
Yeah, no, and I'm not gonna wear red either. I know I can't be like cheering for Indiana in the media section. It's gonna be very difficult for me.
No, you're not a Notre Dame football beat reporter.
I know. I'll keep it neutral. And then after the game, we still got to make some fun. We got to figure out if we can do it at the Tap. But I think that's a good place to go.
We can also just tell people to follow the Assembly Call Twitter.
Yeah,
for updates.
That is true. Andy, are you on Skype yet?
I think I've clicked to open it like 4 times now, and nothing has happened. So give it a minute.
It took me a minute too.
Okay. Give us all just a minute or two, folks. So just so you know how this works, in case you care, we broadcast obviously on YouTube, but we also have a simultaneous Skype call going. And that allows us to record the audio, and I can do the intro and the outro bumper music. If you ever wonder why there's like this silence at times, it's because we've got the bumper music playing, and we can't play it through YouTube, but it's playing over here in the other program that we use. So that's why there's that awkward silence, and sometimes I'm randomly holding up my finger.
Hey, and if you guys listen to the live show or watch the live show on YouTube, also turn on your radios on Fridays and just leave the show on. You can leave the room or whatever, but we want people to think they're actually listening to the Friday video show.
Andy, are you in here yet?
Yeah, I'm trying to.
No.
Skype is actually open at this point, so that's progress.
That is good. So we did the normal stuff and then talked a little bit about that Thamel article about the FBI probe. No specific. So do you want to do a bottoms line, or you want to hop right into talking about Justin and Al?
Nah, just go into what you already got.
Yeah, I think that's the right idea.
Okay.
Man, these Norwegian skiers are fast. Something I bet nobody ever thought they'd hear on the post-game show.
That's why people come here. That's why they watch.
That's right. That's right.
Much like the referees calling 50 fouls in a game. I mean, you got to give the people what they want.
Hey, what the hell's going on with Big Ten basketball tonight, by the way?
Yeah, did you see it, Andy?
I just got home, but I saw the score at halftime is like.
Well, and ridiculous. Purdue lost to Wisconsin.
Purdue lost to Wisconsin.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at her practice.
People were saying that was one of the worst games they've ever watched.
Oh, well.
Time to update that bracket.
I think Purdue hit a wall, man. I really do. They peaked early.
It was called Freddie McSwain.
Yeah. Oh! Guy almost fell. Oh, that was crazy. His ski almost snapped. And he kept going. It was so weird.
All right. Here we go.
I won't make those noises. I won't make those noises while we're on the air, bro.
That's okay. That's compelling audio right there. You had everybody leaning in right there. That was good stuff.
How do you say dough in Norwegian?
That feels like a universal,
probably
word. All right, Andy, you ready to roll here?
Yep.
Okay. We'll start with Justin Smith.
All right. I'm gonna pull up your run sheet here.
Okay. Okay, here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Ryan Phillips. And yes, Andy Bottoms is here as he promised that he would be. Don't forget, if you ever have to miss all or part of an episode of Assembly Call Radio, there are 2 great ways to catch up. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Assembly Call. Or you can join our live Thursday night broadcast or watch the video replays by subscribing to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. All right, fellas. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to dive in a little bit more and talk about Justin Smith and Al Durham. As we mentioned, they've both been up and down. They've had some brief flashes this season, but nothing consistent. And we clearly don't know yet if what we saw in that Illinois game was just another brief flash or maybe a harbinger of some positive play to come down the stretch. But I want to take a big picture view with each guy, based on what we've seen of them so far. And let's start with Justin Smith. And by the way, kudos to Justin from our Slack group for suggesting this topic. And Ryan, I want to start with you on Justin Smith because you've obviously been really, really high on him ever since he committed. And I think, in terms of some of the strengths and weaknesses that we've seen from him, from a strength perspective, he's a smarter offensive basketball player than I expected, especially against a zone. He's been a good offensive rebounder. He gets himself into good positions. He's just really struggled to finish. His shooting has been a little bit inconsistent and his finishing around the rim has been a little bit inconsistent. That was maybe one of the most encouraging things we saw against Illinois was better. And defensively, he's still got a ways to go. The athletic talent is there, but the recognition, the awareness, the quickness in decision-making, and some of the toughness that you need to defend like Archie Miller wants is not there. And, again, a freshman needing to adjust, that's not totally unexpected. What are some other strengths and weaknesses of his that have stood out? And how does your assessment of his long-term potential, how is it now after seeing him play for 20-some games this year?
Oh, we haven't seen close to the best of him. I mean, I think that you're he's a guy who is going to continue to get better, who's going to probably, rise exponentially as he develops and gets more playing time. But what we're seeing from him is he's a very smart, as you said, well-rounded, smooth basketball player that is just starting to get confident enough in his ability to make an impact at the college level. And, I don't think it's, I don't know. It's hard to say early on, where his ceiling is, but I think that you look at the guy, he's athletic, but he's not Troy Williams athletic, like jump out of the gym, but he's a better basketball player than Troy was maybe into before his junior year. Justin is just smarter. He's more solid. He's more well-rounded. There's just so much to his game that has potential. I love the touch on his shot. His jumper is not refined yet, but you can tell it's going to be a weapon. I like that he's getting the confidence to start driving now, as opposed to just catching the ball on the baseline and going up. I like that he is attacking the glass on the offensive end. He's not getting there yet, but you can see that the desire to do that and be a really good rebounder is there. And I think it's great for Justin that he's playing with a guy like Jawan Morgan, who is sort of showing him the path to be that guy. So I'm as high on him as I've been. I think that he's going to be a great player at Indiana. I think that he just needs to continue to develop and, of course, get stronger. And that's the big thing for all freshmen, all high school players and all freshmen, in college basketball. Just get stronger, get used to, not getting every single call. When you're a star in high school, it's easy to get every single call. It's easy to finish the rim because you're more athletic and stronger than everybody else. All that stuff. You've just kind of got to fight and battle through that and get used to it, at that next level. I don't think he's going to have a problem with that. I think it's going to take some time, though.
Andy, where do you stand on Justin? Has he been better than you expected, about what you expected, or worse?
I think probably a little better. I think he's gotten to maybe I say that because he's gotten to play more than I might have anticipated him being able to play. And I think part of that is Durham going down. So it's a little bit hard to say. I think when you put it in that light, he's probably performed a little bit better than you might have expected, just because, he really had to step in and play a more major role. And there have been games when he was absolutely critical to IU winning the game. I think last night was certainly one of those, and the first Minnesota game are the two that really stand out. But I think great experience for him to look back on, and if you really kind of planned out a blueprint for him before the season began, he's probably played more than you would have expected at that point, and I think has played relatively well. Struggled to finish around the basket at times. I think defense has been a struggle for him, where you're not just getting by on athleticism and things like that, where he's trying to figure out the scheme. But I think you've seen improvement with him along with other guys. You watch him rotate on defense. There's definitely a big difference looking at him now in that regard than what he looked like earlier in the season.
So I was trying to think of a comp for him, trying to think of a comp for both of these guys. And Ryan, I think mentioning Troy Williams is a good one. I mean, those guys have some similarities in terms of their athleticism. Justin certainly does not have the irrational confidence that Troy had, for better or worse, because
opposite, actually.
When Troy was on, he could be dynamic, but he could also take you out of games at times, especially when he was younger. So let me throw this comparison out to you, and especially how it might track for Justin's career. Because through his freshman year, looking at the numbers, he's basically been kind of a rich man's Will Sheehy based on what Sheehy did as a freshman. Sheehy averaged 4.8 points, 2.1 boards. He had an offensive rating of about 100.8, effective field goal percentage of 51.2%, and played 34.5% of the minutes. Justin Smith is basically a tick above all of those numbers. And the reason why that one came to mind is the athleticism, for one. The fact that, Sheehy was a guy I think that we all felt he was a good mid-range shooter. The three-point shooting never quite materialized on a truly, consistent, prolific level. I think Justin hopefully profiles to be even a little bit better three-point shooter than Will. And Will's a guy, even though his senior year was disappointing, I think that showed maybe some of the limitations of his game, but also, just that roster was kind of crazy that year. But he's a guy as a junior was 6th man of the year. And obviously he was more of a personality than Justin. So I don't think Justin's going to have that kind of dynamic impact from a personality perspective, but similar type athlete, similar type intelligence, kind of working around the basket. Where do you kind of fall on that? Do you think that's a decent comparison for Justin, and in terms of what you think his potential can be as a player?
I think his ceiling is way higher than Sheehy's. And also, if Justin Smith turns out to be Will Sheehy, I will lose about 5 years off my life. I think we all remember my relationship with Will Sheehy.
Shows were more fun back then.
For you. Look, I think the comparison is understandable given their numbers. I just think that Justin is a much more well-rounded player. I think he's going to be a better shooter just because I like his release and the rotation he gets on it a lot more. I think that he kind of over-rotates his body a little bit, and that's why we're seeing some of his shots come off short, long, side-to-side, whatever. But I think that he's got the makeup of a guy who could be a much better player than a guy who wins a 6th man of the year. I think that, and look, Sheehy was great as a junior and winning that 6th man of the year, and he was very key to that team. But I do think that Smith's potential is much higher than Sheehy's if he develops as he's supposed to. I mean, that's why we call it a ceiling and not, a projection, and a prediction. So it's going to take some time and it's going to take some work, but I feel like he's a guy who could really surpass what he was able to accomplish.
Andy?
That was just laying bait out for Ryan to try to
seriously
get him something there. Yeah, I think an interesting one. He's a little bit shorter than this guy, but Christian Watford is one that kind of came to mind for me.
That's not a bad call.
Could step out and make shots, and I think we've seen that from Justin, albeit inconsistently. But I think that's something that he'll work on a lot in the offseason. I was able to listen to a little bit of Archie's radio show tonight. He talked that somebody asked him kind of about Juwan, like what can he get better at. He talked about outside shooting. I think he'd say the same thing with Justin Smith to be more consistent there. But I mean, that baseline jump shot he hit last night, some of the threes that he took in that Minnesota game, he has a good shot. I think could develop that with time. And I think Watford really became a good rebounder over the course of his time at IU to the point where by the end he was really effective in that regard. And I think you can
better defender too. He became much better.
Yeah. And I think you could see the similar progression from Justin Smith. So he's a little bit shorter, but that was one that one that came to mind for me.
He's a better athlete than Christian, but that's a good one. I
mean, you're never going to have a perfect one-to-one comparison, but I would say maybe somewhere between those two guys, in their strengths and weaknesses and where they end up is a fair comparison. I think with Watford, he got to play so much early that I think he developed pretty fast. Whereas I think Smith is going to have to put in a ton of work in the offseason because, he's playing, as you said, like 35% of the minutes, 34% of the minutes. He's going to have to put in a lot of work. And I think that the Colin Hartman injury and the Deron Davis injuries both were, tough for the team, but they were really good for a guy like Justin Smith because he got thrown into the mix, very quickly at that point.
You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we were talking about Indiana's two freshmen who had big games against Illinois. We just got done talking about Justin Smith, and now, Andy, let's turn our attention to Al Durham. And I think in terms of some of the strengths that Al has shown, we've talked about before how effective he has been at driving to the basket, at driving contact, at drawing contact, and even finishing through contact. He has really showed a strong ability to do that, which we figured coming in from how he profiled as a high school prospect. His shooting has been inconsistent, but he is 4 for his last 6, so that's showing some improvement.
From 3.
Yeah, from 3. Yes, the shooting from 3. He's not a guy who creates very much. He doesn't have a very high assist rate. Doesn't make a ton of mistakes either. And on the defensive end is a very willing defender, but can certainly, like a lot of freshmen like Justin Smith, can get a little bit lost at times and just needs to gain more strength and experience. But in terms of Al, again, and his minutes have been way up and down from the start of the season to the middle to then, what he did last night. Where do you kind of fall on him and how you project him moving forward?
I mean, I think he's another guy based on circumstances of the roster has gotten to play more than you would have projected early in the season. The Curtis Jones transfer had really opened the door for him. And in addition to that, his good play early on earned him additional playing time as well. And I think that may or may not have, played a factor in, Curtis Jones ended up leaving. So it's a, maybe a chicken and egg type conversation there. But so I think he's played well. I mean, you look at the game last night, I thought against a really high pressure defense showed as much poise as anybody in terms of taking care of the basketball and really when he needed to slowing down, gathering, and then attacking as opposed to really allowing himself to get sped up. And those are obviously the kinds of things that, will serve him well and should only get better with time as he learns even better how to pick his spots and things like that. So I've been impressed with him. I mean, I think the things that everybody said he would be pretty good at, I think he's been pretty good at, and that would be defense and, being able to drive and finish just because of his length around the basket. He's a bigger guard in that role than IU's had for the most part in recent years. And I think the question marks that people had in terms of him being able to shoot the ball have been the things that you'd probably point to as question marks. So I think he's on balance been what you would expect him to be.
Can I throw out a comparison for Al? I struggled a little bit with this one. But the guy who came to mind in terms of recent memory is Stan Robinson, Andy. A guy whose strength was driving to the basket, was not shooting. He was 3 for 26 from three-point range his first 2 years at Indiana before he transferred to Rhode Island and has been about a 35% shooter at Rhode Island. And a guy who his efficiency has gone up at Rhode Island, even though his free throw rate has gone down. And if Al can start making more outside shots, we could see that happen with him too. defensively, Stan was, I think, much better than Al at this stage. He was just sturdier. He was quicker. Stan's a guy now.
Centers, I believe.
Yeah. Well, and he's a guy now who has the fifth best steal rate in the country. And Al is not a guy who's generated a lot of steals. So again, it's not a perfect comparison, but Stan is now a guy who, from a freshman who was wildly inconsistent and couldn't shoot, is playing 66% of the minutes on a pretty good Rhode Island team and has turned himself into a decent spot-up shooter. So if you look for maybe what the ceiling of Al Durham is, I think a guy like Stan Robinson, what he has turned himself into, that seems to me like what the ceiling could be for Al. Do you think that's fair to say?
I mean, the obvious comparison that you missed is that they both shoot with either hand.
Yeah, that too.
sometimes within the flow of the game, sometimes season to season. But
I'm getting flashbacks. Please stop.
Yeah, sorry. But no, I think that's fair. I struggled to think of one just because of his kind of size and length that he has on the perimeter. He doesn't really remind you of a lot of guards that were there in the Crean era, as the point guards tended to be. If you project him as a point guard, they tended to be smaller, and the two guards tended to shoot the ball better. So it's a little bit hard to, kind of fit him into somebody from the Crean era. So I think that's probably as good a one as any. I think defensively, you certainly can see a ceiling like that there, based on some of the things that he's shown this year. And I think what he's done better than Stan was really, again, going back to that poise and trying to take care of the basketball. Again, not creating a ton for others based on the assist rate, but, good straight line drive guy. And I think one who's really going to grow. And I think when he came in, everybody said, as a 4-year player, watch him progress and see how that goes. And I think he's had, a good first year as you start to project him forward.
Ryan, your thoughts on Al?
Just don't turn into Stan Robinson, the Indiana version. If you want to turn into the Rhode Island version, okay, but don't put us through the middle bit. Just go straight to but yeah. No, I think that's a fair comparison, but I also think that Al maybe is a little bit smoother offensively than Stan is and ever has been. And while his shot is kind of jerky, I think that it's certainly smoother than Stan's has ever looked, I think.
Yeah. All righty. Well, look, I think both those guys have a lot of potential. Both those guys have shown some good moments. So hopefully they can take what they did against Illinois, build on it. And if Indiana can start getting a little bit more consistent contributions from those guys, now you start looking at these games against Iowa and Nebraska and Ohio State and into the Big Ten tournament. Those are guys off the bench who can give Indiana a big lift. So hopefully that continues. All right, coming up, we are going to look ahead to the Big Ten tournament because there is some growing optimism about Indiana's chances, and we want to indulge that while we still can. So stick with us here on the Assembly Call. All right, 16:06 for that segment.
I mentioned Archie's comment about Juwan on the radio show. My favorite, though, I don't know if people tweeted this out or not because it was right before I left for her practice, but Don Fisher somehow asked him about some proposal where there might be like a fourth referee, and Archie's response was something to the effect of, we don't need another guy out there to screw up the game.
That's awesome. Archie's great, man. That is awesome. So, by the way, we are at 28-29.
I think I'm gonna order food online because I'm friggin' starving.
It's a weekly thing with you.
It is, man. It's just a weird time. It's 6 o'clock here. It's a weird time thing.
So hey, let's map this out here because I do think that there's a way to make this discussion interesting.
I also want to look and see because with so many teams, I always struggle with who gets what buys and whatever other nonsense there is out there. So I'm trying to pull up a bracket, see how they bracket this thing out before we talk about it.
Nick Baumgart, I think, tweeted one out recently with where it stands today.
I just looked on. I'm just looking on their site.
But yeah,
travel packages to go to New York, outstanding.
Yeah,
I bet they've sold a whole.
That's super affordable.
Mm-hmm. So a couple. I mean, and look, I think especially with how crazy tonight has been, it's a good time to talk about the Big Ten tournament because, I mean, why not Indiana winning a couple games? Wisconsin's beating Purdue and Penn State's dominating Ohio State.
Because it's the Big Ten tournament.
I know, but hey, it's what? It's a new coach.
It's Indiana.
It's a new era.
It's Indiana. It's Indiana.
I know. Why aren't we going to win the Big Ten tournament?
The nadir, the absolute nadir of all Big Ten tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know. That's what I'm saying. So let's indulge it while people are excited about it before the stark reality hits us all in the face that it's the Big Ten tournament. We're never going to win the Big Ten tournament. So, but some year we will, and it's going to come totally out of nowhere. Why not this year? That's all I'm saying. Hop on Juwan Morgan's back and let's go. That is all I'm saying.
Given Juwan's history, it would break in half, and he'd need a whole.
Hey! Knock on wood.
Just saying.
Bite your tongue.
Yeah.
You bite your tongue, you son of
a. Shut your mouth when you're talking to me.
That is a solid Will Ferrell reference. All right. Should we do this? Okay, we've got like 22 minutes. Yeah, so let's shoot for 12, 13 minutes this segment because we got some chewy questions that we can talk about.
Okay. Chewy?
Yeah, chewy. It's a good adjective for questions.
You watch too much snowboarding at the Olympics. That's such a buttery question.
Is that what they say?
Oh, among many other things. It's a Southern California thing, I think.
Oh my.
Those crazy Southern Californians.
All right. Here we go. Let's do this. Andy, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Go to assemblycall.com/join right now or at the next convenient time so that you can learn how to subscribe to our email newsletter. Because if you want to get more out of being an IU basketball fan, then you really do need to be on our newsletter list. Over 5,000 IU fans are on it. And you will get, when you join, our weekly Six Banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our post-game analysis emails. Andy and I tag teamed the Illinois one because it was a little late, but we still had it out ready for you at 6:15 Central Time the next morning, as we always do. And those emails are always free, and they will make you a smarter IU basketball fan. So go to assemblycall.com/join and make sure that you are on that list. I am Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms, Ryan Phillips, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Big Ten tournament. And usually that, you talk about the Big Ten tournament with IU fans, immediately people start to snicker if they don't just run out of the room terrified at the mere thought of the Big Ten tournament, given Indiana's history in it. But Scotchy in our Slack group earlier today said, hey, Big Ten tournament, new time, new venue, new coach, new attitude. You're our only hope. He thinks teams like Purdue and Minnesota and Michigan State playing them on a neutral court could be beatable. He's got some hope. So, Andy, Ryan, is there reason for hope? And I think it's especially interesting to be asking this question on the heels of seeing Wisconsin beat Purdue and seeing Penn State be up, 42-19 over Ohio State, here on Thursday evening. I know Indiana's history has been terrible, Andy, but is this possibly the year with Indiana peaking at the right time, potentially, that they could make a little bit of noise in the Big Ten tournament, or is this crazy talk?
I think it's hard for everyone to get over the mental hurdle of believing that this is something that could be viewed as successful for IU. So from that standpoint, it's a little bit hard to kind of shift your mindset that way. But I think the positive things are the team is playing as well as they have all season at this point, and have really proven, with the exception of that Ohio State game, if you look at the top teams in the Big Ten, Purdue, they played very well at IU. Michigan State, they played well at IU. Michigan feels like it was forever ago, so it's hard to really look too much that way. And Ohio State, I don't know, is a team that will necessarily blow you off the floor. I think when you look at that, IU has played well against some of the top teams in the league, and IU has more confidence at this point in the season than they did before. But certainly as a fan, I struggle mentally to get over the hurdle of actually believing that something positive could happen. But certainly if there was a team that was, peaking, I don't know if that's the right word or not, but a team that was really playing well and had some momentum going into it, I think this is a different story than what we've seen a lot of times in the past.
Well, Penn State also looks like a team that is starting to peak. And Ryan, to play devil's advocate with this, Indiana has won 3 straight games. Yes, none of those teams are in the top 100 in KenPom, and You had your shot against Michigan State. You had your shot against Purdue in your own building in games that were winnable, and you let them slip away. So why should we necessarily think that on a neutral floor that would be any better when you couldn't get them at home? And we'll see what Indiana can do at home against Ohio State. So I understand, kind of the optimism and the excitement and the hope. And as sports fans, look, that's what we've got. So, I think we should all indulge it. But I kind of agree with Andy. The history of the Big Ten tournament is just, they're staring us in the face, waiting to beat down any hope that we might have. And as excited as we want to be about this 3-game winning streak, it is important to remember who these games are against. And now I think we really need to see what Indiana does in these next 3 games before we start, booking any trips for the Saturday, Sunday games in the Big Ten tourney.
Yeah, I get the shakes when I think of our history in the Big Ten tournament. So I think it's fair to be cautious when projecting out. And again, yeah, different era, different style of play, all that stuff. But you know what? It's hard to sit here and be optimistic about it just because of the past. So it's always been a mess. It's always been tough, no matter who the coach has been. I mean, this has always been a thing with Indiana. But you know what? That doesn't change until it does. And so this team has a chance to change that, maybe win a couple games. But what I also think you've got to understand about this team is it plays defense. And when you play defense, you have a chance to win every game if you play the right way. And so we've said that for weeks. I feel like I've beaten that horse until it's been dead, come back to life and died again. So it's, if you just play defense and you focus on doing the little things, you can be in every game. And that's all you can ask is late in the game to be in the game and ready to, have a chance down the stretch. And they've done that a few times this year with some good teams, but they haven't finished it out. We're still looking for that big win from them. And it hasn't come yet. And I think we're all just waiting for that one to sort of that big win to sort of come.
In all honesty, though, I mean, if I try to think of good memories from the Big Ten tournament, Kirk Haston blocking Frank Williams at the end of that Illinois game to preserve the win is literally the only positive memory I can think of from the Big Ten
Victor
tournament.
Victor Oladipo 360 dunk against Illinois, I think it was.
Yeah.
Year. That's the only, I'm literally, that's all.
That wasn't necessarily like a good game, but yeah, you're right.
No, it was a terrible game, but I'm talking about
play.
single memories. Like, he had a 360 dunk. That's there's your positive.
I know all the memories are bad. Like I have to sift through so many bad ones to try and find.
Those two might honestly be the only ones. Okay, sorry, not to bring everybody down. Sorry, move on. Jared, take us back up.
Okay, here's the other reason for hope is we're still due for about 10 good shooting games. So maybe we're just saving them all for the end of the season.
They'd have to shoot so well for it to even out, Jared.
I know,
but I don't even want to think about it.
Maybe. Okay, so Andy, here's a question that we got, and I think it's important to put out there just so people kind of understand how these things work. So this is from Rob. And he says, in this current season, would IU have benefited from not getting a bye in the first round of the Big Ten tournament? Would it have improved our bracketology profile or chances for the NIT to play and win an extra game? I responded to him on Slack thusly. I said, I don't think it would matter because the issue is not going to be a lack of wins, if Indiana could win 2 of these last 3, but a lack of quality wins. And beating, some moribund Big Ten team isn't really going to help with that. And it actually just introduces a chance, for Big Ten tournament bad luck to happen and then to lose on a neutral court before you could even get to a game that might matter. So I just don't see any reason.
Totally be on brand for Indiana.
Yeah. So is that the right way to look at it, even for the NIT too? That it, just notching one more win against a 100 level team, it's probably not going to move the needle more than what the risk would be, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that the teams that play in the first round are the teams that finish 11th through 14th. So even if you were the best of those, you'd be playing the 14th place team, which doesn't do you any good at all. So I think you get into the second round. At this point, IU needs to realistically win it. So what you would want is a chance to play, maybe you end up the 6th seed is somewhat realistic. You play either the 11 or 14 who've already played a game the day before, as opposed to playing somebody fresh. So if you're the 7, you play the 10 seed who's, starting the same time that you are. Get somebody who's already played a game and goes into it that way. And then, if you're the 6, you'd play the 3, presumably after that. And then, see what happens when you get to the semifinals from there. But yeah, at this point, it certainly wouldn't help just to win a game against a bad team, which is the only kind of team that you'd play in those first games on that February 28th day. But certainly everybody go to New York and watch the 11th through 14th place teams play on February 28th. That should be a great time.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
Make Jim Gelini really happy.
This is the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips talking about, hey, Indiana's chances to make a little noise in the Big Ten tournament. And Andy, you kind of alluded to the answer to our last question on this topic, which is from IU Jelly. He wants to know, what is our best chance at winning the Big Ten tournament in terms of matchups through the championship game? Ideally speaking, who would we want to match up with? So you kind of alluded to there how being a 6 seed would be good because then you would get to play a team that has played the day before, presumably would be, a little bit tired, not quite as fresh. What would you see as being the most advantageous path? And I guess there's two ways to look at this. There's the way to look at it for what could actually be the easiest path to winning the Big Ten tournament. And is there any path, given who Indiana could play and maybe beat in the first couple of rounds, that even if they don't win it but make it to the championship game, that they could enter any type of NCAA tournament bubble, or at the very least would help them for the NIT, even if they don't win the Big Ten tournament, because of the wins they would get?
Yeah, I mean, I think they could help themselves from an NIT perspective, but probably not until you'd probably have to win one game, and then the next game you play might help you in that regard. So by the time, if you're the 6, playing the 3, or if you're the 7 seed playing the 2 seed or something like that, I mean, those are the kinds of wins that are going to actually help you. Again, beating the winner of the 11-14 game in that scenario doesn't really do a lot for you. So yeah, I think you've got to, again, there just aren't enough quality wins to be had in the Big Ten at this point. So that's where it really becomes difficult. You need to beat, one of Ohio State, Michigan, probably 2 of Ohio State, Michigan State, Purdue. And in order to beat 2 of them, you're probably going to have to win it, because you wouldn't be able to play all 3 on your way to the championship at that point. So I think it's just a matter of, I guess the best path is probably avoid Michigan State at all costs and hope for the best against anybody else that you play. And who knows how that's going to play out now with Ohio State, still down in the second half as we record this, and Purdue already losing. So, who really knows who that 1 seed is going to be. But at this point, they look like they're all going to have 2 losses heading into the last few games of the season.
Ryan, do you agree? I think we're all in agreement that Michigan State's the last team that we would like to see. I mean, they're the best team in the Big Ten overall, and they're clearly an awful matchup for Indiana.
Yeah, forget the Big Ten tournament. That's just true every day of the week. I mean, it just seems like that's a team that, you actually, in normal years, it's Wisconsin. But I actually think now we match up much better with Wisconsin because of the style we play. So, yeah, I would say that Michigan State always the team you don't want to see at this time of year.
Yeah. Huh. All right. Well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, any final thoughts, Andy, about the Big Ten term as we head in? I mean, I guess the other thought would be, okay, that you wouldn't want to face Michigan State out of Purdue and Ohio State, and we're going to get another chance to face Ohio State at home. Which one of those teams do you think Indiana would be more likely to beat on a neutral floor?
I mean, I guess I would tend to say Ohio State. I think you just go back to what Purdue did with Haas and the size, and even when Michigan State beat them, they're basically just, ran a bunch of guys at him, tried to find ways to push him out just a couple steps further on the floor, and didn't have a ton of success doing it, and basically tried to make him beat you, which is a little bit of what IU did, quite frankly. But I guess I would say Ohio State. I mean, they've really outperformed expectations. So at some point, is it a, luck runs out type of scenario, and you have that, or maybe find a way to get Ohio State matched up with Penn State, who apparently is their kryptonite, and then you could be able to, maybe face Penn State instead. But I guess I would say Ohio State of those two. Although I think they played really well against Purdue. I just think it was probably a taller task, more depth, more talent, more experience to have to play Purdue in that scenario.
Yeah. All righty. Coming up in our final segment, we will answer your questions. We've got a good hypothetical, an interesting one about Romeo, and then someone asked us for our favorite IU dunks and dunkers of all time. So we'll get into that as well. It's coming up. All right. 12:28 for that one. Did you say something, Andy?
I said, I wonder what Ryan will say for his favorite dunk.
What do you think I'll say?
Oh, geez.
What do you think I'll say?
I think we all know what you're going to say.
I don't think you do.
No, we don't. Where are we at here? 40. I need to do some math.
I just
40, 57. Okay.
Food while you guys were talking, yakking away. So hungry.
You ordered food while we were live on the air?
Yeah.
That's multitasking.
That is some
right
multitasking.
It's well timed. It'll probably be there roughly right when we get done. So
thank you.
He's just being efficient.
That is really good.
Efficient
That's good
use.
stuff. 9:03. So we've got 8 minutes and 23 seconds. 8 minutes and 23 seconds.
That's good for a last segment.
Yeah, it's perfect. Okay.
Surprisingly, not a whole lot of action going on in our chat. The three of us guys, you'd be shocked.
No, we don't have much action.
No,
I mean, it's late season. We have to chat more early in the season when we're still
we're very locked in.
We are locked in right now. We're like the team. We are ready to go. We don't need chats. We just know where we're going with each segment.
Although we could probably shoot better from the free throw line.
I mean, maybe. I was gonna laugh that off, but I don't know.
Call me Archie.
I mean, maybe not in a pressure situation, but in the confines of
pressure situation after playing really hard defense for like a 5-minute stretch, we would pass out before we even shot the free throw. So
yeah, if I had time to just saunter around the court, for a little while. And then, if I was doing any kind of hard running, though, I would definitely need to call a timeout, not to ice the shooter, but more to just catch my breath and
cigarette break.
Yeah.
So I just give me a minute.
Oh man. Archie really should do that. He should do that at senior night. Just be like, for all of you who are talking crap about us shooting free throws, I want one of you to come down here, shoot in front of all these people right now.
Yeah.
Let's see how well you do.
Yeah.
Kid make 4 in a row. He's like, fair play.
You get a scholarship.
All right.
All right, let's do this. Let's go. We'll save dunks for the last one because that's one that we could just kind of chew on for a while at the end if we need extra time. All right, so I'll start with this first one from Jeremy. All right, Jeremy. All right. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we are wrapping up another week of talking about Indiana basketball. And it is our 4th segment, so that means it is the time in the show when we kick around some of the questions that you all sent in. Actually, this entire episode has been kicking around segments that you all sent in. So let me just start by thanking you all for being so generous with your ideas, both on Twitter and in Slack, because it really makes preparing for the show easier and more interesting because we know exactly what you would like to hear us talk about, and that's exactly what we want to give you. So really appreciate all the feedback that you guys give us on a weekly basis. And again, if you ever want to get in that Slack group, just send me an email, jared@assemblycall.com. Really good discussions going on in there. We'd love to see that community continue to grow. Andy, let me kick this first question to you. This is from Jeremy Thompson. And I've seen a lot of IU fans kind of playing this hypothetical, kind of what if game. And Jeremy wonders, what if IU played all season like they're playing now? What would their record be potentially? And are we talking NCAA tournament instead of NIT? Obviously, I think the obvious allusion there is to Indiana State, Fort Wayne, Wisconsin, probably that Illinois game that you dropped. You flip those, you turn those losses into wins because you're playing a little bit better. What kind of difference does that make for Indiana?
So if you turn those losses into wins, to me, then you're Nebraska at that point. I mean, that's they're a somewhat hotly debated bubble team at this point, and the reality is they've hardly beaten anybody. Their best win is against Michigan at home, and they've haven't had they've had a couple not so great losses, but they haven't had any really subpar losses at that point. So it certainly would erase some of the games that's like, man, I can't believe we lost that game. And perhaps had they played that way in other games, maybe they were able to pull off one of the games earlier in the season. But I think if all that happened by playing that way was that you took away the Indiana State, Fort Wayne, Illinois, maybe Wisconsin losses, if you kind of look at the four quote unquote worst losses that you had, certainly I think you're in the conversation, but what you still have that is holding you back would be, a lack of quality wins. Now, if you spin that forward and say, hey, well, maybe they win, one or two of these other games that were close, then I think certainly you'd be, in projected fields or at a minimum in the conversation. So I think if you flip those 4 games, you're in the conversation, but I don't think you have a super compelling case in the way that I don't think Nebraska has a terribly compelling case today.
Yeah. And as I mentioned on the show last night, those losses didn't happen in a vacuum. And maybe Indiana's not playing as well right now were it not for those losses, because maybe
That's
those
the
were
key.
important. Yeah. Maybe those were important moments for a team looking to change culture. So,
but if they played all season like they're playing now, maybe they beat Duke, maybe they beat Michigan State, maybe they beat Purdue, so it's but again, as you said, they probably had to go through some of those growing pains to get to where they are now and be able to look back and say, oh yeah, let's not go back there.
Yep. Next question. This is from Josh. Do you think with how the seasons are going with Indiana and Vanderbilt, it would help sway Romeo's decision at all? I feel like Archie has shown a lot more of his capabilities, and in my opinion, this should bode well for us, but I could be clueless. Ryan, I want to get your insight on this, but I think you read the interviews that Alex Bozich has done with Tim Langford over at Inside the Hall, and you hear what Mr. Langford has talked about with really being interested to watch Indiana, and they're impressed with Archie's offense and the shots that are being created and how Romeo would fit into it, and mentioned the improvement. I think absolutely that the work that Archie is doing and the team's improvement makes a huge difference, because Romeo is only going to play 1 year of college basketball. And while there are lots of factors that are going to go into his decision, one of them is obviously going to be he's going to want to compete for some kind of important championship, be it a conference championship or a national championship for his 1 year. And given where Indiana was at the start of the season, that didn't look like it would be likely. But now with kind of the trajectory Indiana's on, you can maybe see that a little bit more if you add a guy like Romeo. So, and Vanderbilt obviously is struggling. They have a losing record. I don't know how bad it is now.
They're 10-16 right now, 4-9 in the SEC after coming back and winning last night.
Yeah, but I mean, Ryan, I absolutely think that is going to help Indiana, have as good a shot as possible with Romeo.
Yeah, I mean, look. Count me as somebody who's never going to rely on a 17-year-old, 18-year-old to make the right decision. But I think that if he has the right people advising him, I think you do have to look at what Indiana has done this year and how they've improved as certainly a mark in Indiana's favor. And at the same time, you have to understand that look at the development for some of the players this year under Archie. And, let's give the rest of the coaching staff and the strength, staff credit. They've really developed some of these guys. And, I don't think that the first factor, you said that maybe the first factor be competing for something like that. I think Archie or Romeo's going to want to get better. I think that's the number one thing, is that he's going to want to develop and move forward. And you look at some of the freshmen, you look at Juwan Morgan, you look at some of these other guys, they have gotten better as the season's gone along and gotten better from last year as well. So I think that's a huge factor that has definitely shown up in Indiana's favor.
Yep. All right, and let's go to our last question. This is a fun one. This comes from East Coast Hoosier, who wonders, what are your favorite IU dunks? Who is the best IU dunker of all time? Clearly, we are not old enough to go way back and talk about all the great dunkers that Indiana has had, because there have been many. But immediately when this question was asked, the dunks that came to mind for me were some of OG's just those incredible explosions down the lane that he had. If you remember at Maryland, at Michigan State, where just felt like he jumped over everyone and finished with so much ferocity. And then, of course, from earlier in the Tom Crean era, you've got the Pritch slap, which is just incredibly memorable, and then the Sheehy slam against Iowa. And then if you really want to go old school, I mean, I still remember being mesmerized anytime Calvert went baseline and combined both grace and power for a dunk. And it really, you want to talk about best dunkers of all time. This is not a name that many people will probably remember and didn't do a whole lot on the court. But Steve Hart was a guy on those mid-90s teams. Actually, I think he only played for 1 or 2 years, who had ridiculous ups. And I remember a couple of pretty good dunks by him. So I don't know if he's the best dunker of all time, but that's a name that some people might not remember, who had some pretty good hops. Andy, we already know what Ryan's going to pick for this, so we can skip over him.
No, you don't.
But what's your favorite dunk of all time?
The Steve Hart reference was great. That guy could not shoot a lick. He would have. I mean, it was like you'd see him and you could tell it was him because he could jump higher than everybody to get rebounds. But then whenever he jumped to shoot the ball, you're like, there's just no chance that this is going in. So, yeah, that was a good callback though for him for sure. I don't really. I mean, the Victor almost dunk was about as good as anything. The Pritch slap to me stands out because it was so unexpected.
Yeah,
that was just like there seemed like there was. You could have bet anything and you would have thought there's no way he's the guy that would throw it down. So I guess I would say that one just because it stands out as so unexpected. But we should give Ryan his time. We're running out of time. So give him his chance.
Victor, probably my favorite, not necessarily because the dunks were as big, but because he was so smooth and fun to watch with it. But a guy who gets forgotten is Roderick Wilmot. Was a heck of a dunker. He was a super athletic guy. It was a lot of fun as a dunker, if we're talking mid 2000s. But yeah, I loved Victor, of course. Wilshie, he had some great ones.
I think people actually think of Rod more as a shooter now because of what he did his senior year and some of those shooting outbursts that he had. Which
he was an unbelievable athlete, really was. I mean, when he would jump for his jump shot, you'd see how high he's off the floor. I mean, it looked like his feet were at the guy defending his chest. I mean, he would get so high off the floor in his jump shot, and when he used that for dunks, it was pretty amazing. Another great dunker, Andy, Greg Graham, obviously. Guy had hops. He had great hops. All right. Great questions. We thank you all for sending those in. And that will do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We will be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim. And go Hoosiers. Perfect.
Another underrated Oladipo dunk was one when they beat Kentucky on the Watt shot. He had a drive where he dunked over somebody.
Was that the one where Vitale kept saying that was a Michael move?
I thought that was the Michigan game that he was talking a lot about Victor and Michael Jordan.
Maybe, but that Kentucky one, maybe you're right, Andy. He did like a shuffle move and went right down the middle and just hammered on somebody.
Yeah. DJ White was a good one for like sheer power.
Yeah.
He would be able to do it, but yeah, those weren't flashy by any means. But
yeah, we could do an entire offseason show on IU dunkers.
Did you guys think I was going to go? Guys too. Did you guys think I was going to go with the Killingsworth dunk? Was that what you were alluding to? Oh yeah. No.
Yeah,
that wasn't that impressive a dunk. It was just.
I can't.
I remember Chris Reynolds
you're acting surprised that you thought that's what. You're surprised that we thought that's what you'd say.
Yeah. Sweet.
All right.
Anything else, gents?
No. Bright and early on Saturday, huh?
Yeah. That's just
for me.
It's outside of Ryan's 2-hour window where games can be played. So
yeah,
it's definitely early.
I'll see if Coach or somebody else wants to join us on that one, Ryan.
Okay. Yeah, I'm out for that one.
Andy is out.
And then next week the Nebraska game is late on.
Is it really
Tuesday? I think it's a 9 Eastern. I want to say.
Holy moly!
I could be totally wrong.
What is? I'm sorry, I missed it.
The Nebraska game next week. I think it's at 9. I might be wrong.
I'm probably not going to be well rested coming into Bloomington. Just gonna throw that out there. Yep, that's an 8. It's an 8 o'clock start.
Throw that out there.
That's on Tuesday,
but that's 8 o'clock for you, so it is 9 Eastern, right?
I'm going to pick up my sister-in-law late at the airport on Wednesday night because she's.
Oh, that's Wednesday. I'll be flying.
No, it's Tuesday night.
Okay, it's Tuesday then. Yeah, okay. I was mixed up. I thought it was a Tuesday game. I thought you were talking.
Yeah, it's a Tuesday because then they play again on Friday when we'll be there. So yeah.
All right. Hey, we can do this.
Only 3 games left. Hard to believe.
Yep, I know.
I mean, before the 4-game Big Ten tournament run, obviously, as we've discussed.
I'll say this: we don't have a good record. Earlier. This season has been so much less painful than last year. Even though
because we're improving. I mean,
last year, I know, but like we've had this compressed schedule, and we've had this and that and the other thing, and it's like, you know what? It's not that bad. We've had worse,
and we've had Juwan Morgan to carry us through. Yeah. The one consistent force.
Yeah. And as you sit here, I have the TV on in front of me, and I obviously can't hear it. And there's Tom Crean sitting in the studio.
Thanks, Tom.
Do you think he checks the Ken Palm metrics just to see how the defense is doing? We know Archie's been checking.
I tell you what, he talked about it on the coach's radio show tonight. He said something about he looked at it. I want to say it was somewhere around the Michigan or the Iowa game, and they were 197th or whatever. And they said, then it was at some point it was 52. And he goes, yeah, to improve. He was like, I just wanted to get into the top 100. And he's like, so to improve 145, 147 spots, he's like, he said it's a real testament to the players. And and all that stuff. He gave them a lot of credit for it and how much they've improved on that on the floor and things like that. So it was pretty cool. So definitely hammers home how much although somebody actually asked him a question phrased as, "Oh, you made it to the top 50 in defensive efficiency," or something like that. So they kind of led him there, but he definitely knows. He's definitely checking. He's definitely refreshing that when he gets home after the game. There's
Penn State still up 20 with 2:26 to go.
I wouldn't want to play them. I think it's easy to forget we played them without Josh Reeves, and he's a really good player.
Yeah,
that might have swung the difference in that game.
We've gotten pretty lucky with playing some teams with injured players this year.
They've got,
but we've had our own injuries, so
yeah, they've got a really.
I mean, that's true. That's fair.
Stretch. I don't know whether they can overcome some of the other losses that they've had, but they play at Purdue, which will obviously be hard. They play Michigan at home. They play at Nebraska. So I mean, every game they have left is a potentially like quadrant 1 win that they don't really have a lot of yet, but they get there. Although they did lose to Minnesota and Northwestern and Rider, and didn't schedule well in the non-conference, so that's not going to help. But yeah, they're definitely a team I wouldn't want to play. Although you watch,
Ryan's food is here.
Yeah, no, it's not. I just realized that tonight my duty is to watch the USA hockey team lose to Slovakia. Awesome, so happy.
Nice.
Yeah, and Michaela Schifrin is half a second behind before her second slalom run, so she may not be bringing home gold in that one. That's a lot. That's a lot of time to make up in the slalom. I have learned.
Yes.
Once every 4 years, I get to care about these sports and relearn everything I missed. So, fuck. All right, guys.
Now we have to mark this explicit.
You can cut. You can beep that. Come on.
He's not gonna beep it. He's not gonna go back and beep it on YouTube. What are you?
Yeah. I mean, who's still watching this late on YouTube?
Seriously.
If you are, and Ryan offended you.
It may be your daughter in the future, Jared. We got into that.
Yeah. Can't wait till the guy's 2-year-old who said he'd watched this before.
Yeah.
Starts
shooting
that around.
We've literally had someone say that their 2-year-old watches you, and you cuss the next week.
I am who I am. Don't try to change me.
I am not a role model.
I am not a role model.
Oh boy.
Okay.
All right. Well, and
I think it's fun that we do our normal post-show stuff just like live now instead of
true.
Now we hit stop broadcast. There's just like this awkward silence, and we all say bye.
Yeah. You don't want to waste any good material when nobody's recording. So obviously,
got to save this for posterity and for.
Hey, are you calling the tap, Ryan?
No, I have not. I asked Allie about it. She has not got back to me because she's.
Okay, so that's the only thing that we need to do. We don't need to reserve anything for Knicks, but
yeah, try and call them tomorrow if you can. And just
Knicks?
No, the tap.
Oh, the tap. All right, cool. All right, go enjoy your slaloming.
I feel like we always end up there anyway, so might as well, right?
Might as well.
Yeah.
All right, I'm at it, boys.
See you guys.
Well, I'll talk to you guys next week.
Yep. See you, everybody. We'll talk to you Saturday afternoon.
All right.
Yep.
Later.